the fight in our generation and this century and this decade is going to be the fight for the separation of money and state.
Yes. Broadcasting from Brisbane, Australia, this is the FOMO Show. Now, this episode is very special. We've got an interview lined up with Aleks Svetski, who's the co-founder and CEO of Amber, an incredible app allowing you to regularly invest in Bitcoin. Now, a quick note, if you're around young children or if you yourself aren't a fan of swearing, this episode contains swear words, so just be aware of that. Next disclaimer is that this is not investment or any other type of advice. If you're listening to the show and interested in any of this sort of stuff, anything you hear here is educational, just a bit of a fun conversation, and we're not saying you should buy anything at all. So do your own research, never invest more you can afford to lose, and most of all, avoid the fear of missing out. If you're new around here and you're new to blockchain and cryptocurrencies, check out our Crypto Basics, which starts at episode 2 and continues until episode 8. Gives you a bit of a background on what blockchain and cryptocurrencies is all about. And finally, if you're looking for some privacy and security resources, check out FOMO.show/privacy. It's got all of the top tools and tips to take control of your online privacy. And with that, we're going to jump straight into the interview. So here we go.
Hi, my name's Matt. I like long walks on the beach. That is the intro for this show.
Hey everyone, this is Matt here. I'm here with Joe and Aleks Svetski, who is the CEO of Amber. And we are going to be just essentially running through a whole bunch. We've got a pretty wide-ranging conversation set up and in store for you guys. And we're going to also talk about Amber, which is the product he's developing. So yeah, how you doing, Aleks?
Sleep deprived.
Right.
Yes.
Life of a founder.
Not because I've had a baby, but because I've got another type of baby. I don't know. Last 2 nights I was just telling Joe before I couldn't fucking sleep. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. I had a catch up with a dude on Sunday night, and nice guy and all, but really, really, really fucking naive, sitting there telling me he's like got half his money in Bitcoin and half his money in Bitcoin SV. I was like, what the and he's like just throwing out dumb buzzwords like scalability and God knows what else. Anyway, so that my Sunday night fucking went down the toilet trying to talk to them. I don't know why I waste my time. And
why did you waste your time though? Was there?
Because I like the guy. He's actually a nice guy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was trying to like talk some sense into him. And you know what? The upside for me is we made a bet for 1 Bitcoin that BSV is going to fucking tank versus he thinks it's going to be the one.
Right.
So anyway, so I just basically forward earned some Bitcoin. So I'm happy with that.
You made money out of it.
Exactly. So it was worth it. and he can't say that I didn't try and like say otherwise. So, you know.
Wow, maybe we should all go and find some BSV supporters.
BSV guys and just make some bets. Fuck, seriously.
Yeah.
There's like a fucking winning strategy.
You'd want security though, wouldn't you? Like you'd want to, have a multi-sig account or something and know that there's some Bitcoin there in escrow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was that, and then I ended up, for some fucking strange reason, I went to bed at 2:30 and woke up at 4, and then mangled all of Monday because I had like meetings back to back.
Yep.
And then I thought Monday night I got to sleep at about 11. I thought, all right, I'll get some sleep finally, and then this morning I woke up at 3
a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, I don't know why. So
does that happen to you often? Like,
no.
Right.
Fucking what's going on? So and it's 7 o'clock now. So pardon my I'm probably going to swear a lot again, and I'm probably going to slur by the end of this.
Yeah,
so,
we'll put a warning in at the so people know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beware profanity, extreme profanity.
Talk a little bit about yourself then. Like why? Because I mean, now you're the CEO of a growing fintech company, very very focused on Bitcoin, but you've had a long story. Like it wasn't always this way. You weren't always building a fintech company in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. There was a point in time where I was crawling.
Right, as a baby, or
yes.
was it? Yeah, right.
I'm just screwing with you now.
Just say like all children, Aleks was born kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't. I wasn't born a Bitcoiner. I promise.
No, but there were some you've led a pretty interesting life. I mean, we've talked off mic many times about what's led you to this point.
Yep.
I guess, and you do have a real passion for starting companies, a real passion for money and monetary theory. So
I guess just so the listeners can get a bit of an idea of where you're coming from.
Yep.
Where did that all begin?
Well, I'm going to give a version of the story that actually goes back a little bit further than what I usually talk about, because I usually talk about me going to uni, then trading, putting money on the markets and all that sort of stuff. But maybe I'll go a step behind that, which is I was always really good at school, but I was always in trouble at school. So like the teachers didn't really know what to do with me. So like they're like, get out of the class, but fuck, you got an A again. It's like, what do we do with this guy? So and I sort of built a bit of a persona out of that. Sort of pushing the envelope wherever I could. And I don't know, my uncle was a real influence on me when I was younger. So, my parents sort of split up when they were younger, and it was a really like sort of messy split up, like old wogs who, it's not like Australian divorces, right? Where, then the parents share the kids and stuff like that. Here it's like, you talk to your mum, it's like, oh, what do you think about dad? I hope he dies. What do you think about mum? I'm going to fucking kill her. It's like, so there's no like niceness about it.
Be civil for the kids.
There's zero
like
civility,
that,
right? It's about fucking who am I going to kill and how's he going to die, basically.
Yeah, okay.
And so it was a really sort of messy period. So anyway, my brother ended up with my mum. I ended up with my dad. And me and my dad really didn't get along. So I ended up, my uncle was the guy that I looked up to, and he was sort of my quasi dad in effect. Right. And he was very political. He'd sort of been very patriotic, very interested in history, much more well-read than my dad and all that sort of stuff. So he was the guy I sort of looked up to.
When you say patriotic, was that like patriotic from Australia, or was that
Macedonia?
Macedonia,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay. So your family's originally from Macedonia.
Exactly. So and Macedonia's got quite a like rich history, and he was extremely well-read, at least in the context of Macedonia and sort of that history, and yeah, he was effectively my inspiration when I was younger, and we sort of had this whole plan he wanted to make me the president of Macedonia, and we're going to go back and take over the country. We're going to fucking blow up parliament. We'll do all this fucking crazy shit, right? Wow. Yeah, I know, right? So that's sort of where that was where my ideology was first forged, right, between the ages of like 14 and 16, 17, and we'd pop a fucking bottle of wine every dinner, and we'd just philosophize and talk, and wow. That's sort of where I went down the path of like really reading works from the Ptolemies of the world and the Aristotles of the world and Alexander the Greats, and my favorite movie growing up was Braveheart. Not fucking some.
So was mine.
Shit. There you go. Exactly. Like that movie used to always make me fucking cry, right? And then Count of Monte Cristo was the other like. So I had a top three. It was Braveheart, Count of Monte Cristo, and actually this movie called Legends of the Fall, which is like an old Brad Pitt movie. And I'm not a Brad Pitt groupie, but it was like
he's got some good movies.
He's got some fantastic movies. It was one of his early movies. Like it was probably like I think his third or fourth movie. Really powerful story about family and how humans interact and like just justice and just that sort of stuff. And so I think those early days like really helped shape a lot of my belief systems and things like that. Anyway, so I was always driven. Always wanted to do more, and I did really well in high school. So I actually finished high school in a little town called Bowral. In New South Wales.
Don Bradman's hometown.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my wife and I went down there for a holiday at New Year's.
There you go. Yeah, so I was the only non-white person there. I went to school there basically, and I got suspended in my first week and all this sort of shit because I came from a really fucking rough school before that. Yeah, and like the school that I came before that, like the week that I left, some teacher got knocked out by some kid throwing a chair across the room or whatever it was, and like all sorts of stuff. And then I come to this new school and there's like everyone's like prim proper. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Typical country town.
Exactly. And also, well, I think Bowral's not only the typical country town, but it's like a relatively affluent country town, right? So it's like, median house price is like 1.2 million and all that sort of stuff. So it was like, I remember because when I finished at Bowral High School, I got voted at the, what's the thing you do at the end of year 12? The formal? Yeah, the formal. Yeah, I got voted most likely to go to jail.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you reckon that helped though? Like, do you reckon? Because it seems like you say you came from a rough school and things were quite different there. do you think going to Barrel kind of did have a bit of a course correction on your life?
Kind of. So it made me, I think it added to my desire to prove myself.
Yeah.
Because I think at that point in time, like I was really academically strong at the other school, and I already felt like I had everyone around my little finger.
Yeah.
So when I went to Barrel, I still remember the math, the head of the math department there was like this like old professor dude. Like this guy had worked in that department for 33 years and not taken a single day of leave.
Wow.
Not a single. So he retired the year I finished year 11 there.
Yeah.
And he had 4.5 years of leave. He was this short, angry, brilliant math guy.
So he'd never taken holidays?
Not a single fucking day for 33 years. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I guess it's a little bit easier when you're a teacher because you get, 12 weeks of holidays.
I guess so, yeah. But like he had this like red face, fucking wrinkled up, angry guy. And I still remember like I came there like halfway through the first term of year 11. And, you know, like, man, the school that I came from, they were so far behind. You know, we thought we were at term 1. When I got to Barrel, I had no idea what was going on. So my first exam, I got 36%. And he came up to me, he was like, you know, I don't think you should be in this class. Like, and this was sort of what we called 2-unit math. Yeah. So like advanced math.
Yeah.
And like that just
lit a fire under you.
You don't say that to me. Like
that doesn't sound like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So two terms later. So like by the end of the semester, my 2-unit math result was 99%. So then he turned around and came to me. He's like, I think you should be doing 3 and 4-unit math.
Yeah, right.
I was like, that's right, motherfucker. So Barrel was a good sort of thing for me, and I finished. I should have finished Dux of the school, but because I'd gotten suspended and I was always in trouble and shit like that, I didn't. But I had the best results in the thing. So anyway, I guess that sort of forged a bunch of interesting things in me, and taking all of that and going to university. Was then sort of I had this drive to do more, and when I was at uni, I felt like I was surrounded by people who, well, not I felt like I was. I was part of I did engineering because that's what the family wanted me to do, and everyone who I was there with, I was like, oh, so you know, why'd you pick engineering? And they're like, oh, you know, got nothing better to do. You know, ask the next guy, it's like, I don't know. Ask the next guy, it's like, oh, I just had enough of a UAI at that time, which was a university admission index, like to get in. Right. I was like, fuck, man, no one's actually doing anything they want to do. Like, because I actually did have an interest in engineering. I had an interest in the math and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know, I was disillusioned with uni. So I was like, fucking, what can I do? So, you know, me and my, you know, infinite curiosity started, like, this is sort of where the book Rich Dad Poor Dad comes in. So like I won this book voucher at school. So the book I went and bought was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't know fucking why. It was weird. On the main street of Barrel, you had Angus and Robertson on one side, and you had this like esoteric sort of bookstore on the other side.
I've been to that bookstore. I think it's still there.
Yeah, is it?
Is it like real long and narrow?
Yeah, it's got like all these weird books, like, you know, spirituality, all this sort of shit.
There was all sorts of. I remember. being quite surprised at some of the books that were in there.
Really good bookstore. So that's where I went in, and I bought Rich Dad Poor Dad. I bought some other one by not Joseph Campbell, but it could have been Joseph Campbell, but not the main guy that we know of, Joseph Campbell. And the book was called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. It was written in like the 70s. Wow, yeah. And that sort of opened my head to some ideas. Now, it created lots of friction in the family because, like, you know, my uncle was all about, you know, Macedonia. This is, you know, who you're going to be, what you are. So I had this like really strong identity around that, and this sort of cracked much of that identity. And I started questioning, you know, outside of, you know, Macedonia and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, got to uni, and then I wanted to do more with uni. So more than just uni. So I'd gotten some scholarship money, and I decided to roll the dice, teach myself how to trade markets. And
so how did you get started in that?
So it was asx.com.au started rolling out like online courses. And yeah, I was just literally following through the online courses, started paper trading. And then, you know, my family got really pissed off about that. They're like, what are you wasting your time with that for? Do your engineering, do your studies. And, you know, we sort of developed this big rift. And I mean, in hindsight now, like, what's it now, like 13, 14, 15 years later, I can kind of appreciate where they were coming from. Like at the time I didn't. So I sort of like one night packed up, left and fucked off and, moved into this dingy little shithole in a place called Fairy Meadow down in Wollongong, which sounds really pretty, but it's like a dump.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's like this really badass dump where like fucking drug dealers and shit live. It's like, where do you live? And I remember you used to say, like, people were like, oh, so whereabouts do you live? I'm like, Fairy Meadow. Like, what? I'm like, Fairy Meadow. It's like, hoping they wouldn't hear it.
On the good end though, on the good side, like just bordering on another suburb.
Yeah. And
how was that though? I mean, how old were you when you moved out?
Like 18, 19.
Right. So you were pretty much just out of school.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And you moved out, and you didn't just move out to were there other people in the place you moved to? Or was it
No. I moved into this little really, really shitty 1-bedroom apartment, which fit my bed, and I had a motorbike, and I would ride the motorbike inside the apartment because I didn't want to park the motorbike outside because it got stolen.
Yeah, Fairy Meadow. Yeah.
So exactly. And yeah, like I'd basically sleep inhaling motorbike fumes.
Jeez.
All night.
Were you working, or did you?
No, the way I subsisted was through Centrelink at the time, and then until I was making enough money trading that I got off Centrelink and I just made a bunch of money on that.
So what sort of stuff were you trading?
So I the first trade I placed was with this old school, like the brokers that you would go into their office, and they'd probably at that time, like, I thought he was helping me place a trade, but he was actually dumping some shit stock on me. It's funny now, right? So he dumped this stock called, Gene Tech or so something like that. I still remember the ticker symbol is GYG. And it's not Guzman and Gomez. This was long before Guzman and Gomez. And yeah, so that thing, I bought the shit at like 50 cents, and by the time I got out of it was like 26 cents, and I was like, fuck this guy. He was like this big fat guy called Doug something. Anyway, and he worked for Bell Potter. So that was sort of my first thing, and I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And this was sort of like when the online trading platforms first started, gaining popularity. So like I remember opening up one of like the early Westpac broking accounts, opened up a CommSec account. I mainly traded Westpac broking at the time, and yeah, like it was just online trading. And then I was trading basically warrants at the time, which are, derivative products similar to options. And yeah, like it was 2007, the heyday. Thought I was a genius.
Wow.
I was, long, I was swing trading, placing longs and shorts and all this sort of stuff. And, within 6, 7, 8 months, like I'd made like 50 grand.
Wow.
And I thought I was a genius. So I made like 10x my money. And I thought I knew everything. Levered up, and then sort of the pre-tremors of the GFC came in, and I didn't know what the fuck was going on. Like I'd just see these big crashes, and I'd double down and just fucking rode my ass all the way down until I was about 200 grand in debt.
Wow.
And no money left, and I was like, fuck.
So, but it didn't stop there. So, I mean, that's a serious situation that you were in there. So what were your next steps after that?
I spent the last bit of money I had on a NLP course.
Wow, that's neuro-linguistic programming, isn't it?
Yeah, neurolinguistics, hypnotherapy and stuff. So I did it with a guy called Steve Linder, who's Tony Robbins' main trainer, or he was at the time. So, and Steve Linder's brilliant. So he actually, he was a student of Buckminster Fuller. He was directly a student of Richard Bandler and Bandler and Grindler, who are the two guys who developed NLP. So, so it was it was really interesting, and yeah, it was the last bit of money I had, so I didn't pay my rent or anything like that. So I slept on the fucking train going back and forth, and I came back and moved out of this place and basically moved into this dude's lounge room. And the only job I could get at short notice was knocking on doors.
Wow, that's a baptism of fire.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was it? What do you have any memories from the early days of knocking on doors? Because that's got to be tough.
Hell yeah, yeah. That was and I was an introvert, like a mega introvert.
Wow.
I still am primarily an introvert. Like, and Matt would know this. Like, I don't like hanging around people. My idea of a good night is reading a book.
Yeah.
Or hiding somewhere. I don't want to know about that shit. So
Yet you're running a company. And,
Yet I'm running a company.
Doing
Exactly.
talks and publishing all the time. And,
correct. So I'm a taught extrovert or learned extrovert. Yeah, let's put it that way. So I took what I learned in that NLP stuff, and I basically developed my own method of communicating and selling to people. So the door-to-door company at the time that I went to was called Cobra, which is sort of like the sounds like some secret society, right? And I mean, it was a cult fucking like that though, right? Because they'd go in there and they had their 5-step ritual, their 8-step ritual, which is, smile, do this, and it's like the Jones theory and, a fear of missing out, like, basically the name of your fucking show, right? So they had all these like sort of systems.
We're a part of Cobra too.
Yeah, you are, exactly, clearly. So all these systems for sales, but it seemed so like mechanical to me. So I just sort of took what I'd learned if I had to dumb down what NLP is, so that, neuro-linguistic programming, it sounds really fancy, but it's really just language of the mind. Wow. So, language is, it's built on patterns, that we've sort of developed over, years, and, a couple guys sat down to really try and understand how those patterns function, certain, linguistic patterns and behavioral patterns and all that sort of stuff. So it's not, by no means is it some predictive mind control model, but there is definitely rules of thumb, and what's the technical name for rules of thumb? Heuristics. Yeah, there's definitely heuristics, and there's definitely models that work a lot of the time that you can use to be a more effective communicator. But by and large, I think to live a more effective life as well, because I think a lot of the rules around NLP are around being at cause, not being at effect. Owning your decisions versus being at the mercy of your decisions or being a victim, etc. et cetera. So teaches like really good primitives and principles. Wow. So anyway, I took that and went fucking selling pay TV, and I had no idea what the fuck was on pay television. I didn't know. I didn't have a TV. I had no idea what was on the channels or any of that sort of stuff. But I'd look at the name of the channels like National Geographic. So when I'm talking to people, I'd be like, look, you've got children, right? Yeah, I've got children. So it's really important to, educate your children in a way that actually matters for the long term. I go, schools these days aren't teaching children what they need. I'd spin all this shit about the National Geographic channel.
Meanwhile, half of it's alien documentaries and,
exactly, or
conspiracy theories.
You and me ain't nothing but mammals, right? So it's like... So I learned how to sell and basically door knocked my way to the top of that sort of business.
Yeah.
And got really disillusioned. Like after about 6 months, I'd felt like I'd sold my soul because I was like selling people shit that I personally would never fucking watch or, do anything with. So really that was like really burnt me out. But it was I needed money. Like I needed to pay, I think it was ANZ like $1,000 a week at the time, and some other bank like $600 a week. So like before I could eat, like I had to make fucking money. So I'd spend my days door knocking, and I'd spend my nights like reading about markets and monetary theory. So that was my because I was so like curious and angry about what had happened. Like I was like, how could I be so fucking dumb? Like what actually happened?
Yeah.
So where did that journey take you?
It took me, having a bit of a precursor with like Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he sort of teamed up with like the Mike Maloney's of the world, and then the Mike Maloney's of the world took me down like the Jim Rickards and Gerald Celentes and the Nouriel Roubini's at the time, and like
so you got deeper and deeper as you
basically like the Alex Jones of the world, like all that sort of stuff. So I became this complete nut job that was doing that stuff, right? Yeah. And look. Some of it was really useful, right? So like understanding monetary theory and fractional reserve and like going down that path, like I sort of like realized that there's something fundamentally wrong with the monetary system. Yeah. And I obviously went down like the whole fucking lizard people and conspiracy theories and like, what a lot of the fucking lunatics that
David Icke and
and all that crazy shit, right? So like, that's if you want to know where that path leads you, it leads you to Bitcoin Cash. So it's a really bad path. Anyway, so I sort of went through all of that, and I guess the upshot of that was, I spent time understanding markets, and I was like, okay, there's something wrong here, and quantitative easing and all of that. So I was a beneficiary of that through getting into gold and silver really early. Yeah, and really kind of redeeming that fuck up. Yeah, with buying gold and silver and sort of at least understanding the essence of what, Austrian economics and hard money and all of that espoused.
Yeah. So I guess talk a little bit of, if you could talk a little bit about that, then that'd be great, because I mean, from up till now, you've essentially you're stuck in a situation where you've lost a lot of money. You're just starting to realize that maybe things weren't the way that you were told they were. So what were your main takeaways from that whole discovery process that then led you down this new road?
Jesus.
I mean, quantitative easing is probably a good place to start.
That was one of the big things. So the idea of money printing and the idea of your wealth being expropriated was one of the big things for me. So I was like, yep, this is like fucked up. And just trying to inquire on what the notion or the actual definition of money really is. The thing is, I didn't go deep enough.
Yeah.
Like if I'd gone deeper, I think I would have discovered Bitcoin a hell of a lot earlier, or I would have been interested in Bitcoin in a much bigger way a hell of a lot earlier. But I wasn't, and I also, my brother and I made a bunch of money out of gold and silver.
Yeah.
And we sold out at the top, because like one of the other things I'd spent some time really trying to understand was like charting and technical analysis and all that sort of stuff. Now, looking back for me on charting and technical analysis, I think that all of that shit is just fucking tea leaves and blind randomness that people find patterns in. But at the time, I guess, if there was one bit of luck or randomness that it did give me was like we timed the top of the gold and silver bubble so well, it wasn't even funny. Like
Wow.
we shorted that shit right at the top. Like we rode it up and we shorted it on like basically the day that fucking silver did the blow off top.
Yep.
We shorted that bitch at like $49. Like it was
really
like we could not have got luckier. Yeah, it was just, and at that time we thought it was skill. We thought it was brilliant. We thought it was smart.
Yeah.
There may have been a little bit of skill involved, maybe like 1%, if I'm being realistic, but it was fucking luck shorting that shit on the way down. So for me, like I came out with a windfall, and I thought I was really intelligent. Now, a lot was happening alongside this though. So during that time, during that whole discovery process of going down the conspiracy theories and the hard money and the quantitative easing and, buying gold and silver and doing all of that stuff, I'd built 3 companies.
Yeah.
Maybe even 4.
Just casually.
Just casually, because I'm a lunatic and, I was just 7 days a week just working. But yeah, I'd ended up I'd stepped out of selling pay TV and I'd ended up building my own sales company, which did really well. And then my business partner at the time took half the money and ran, left me with all the taxes and outstandings and all that sort of stuff. So I sort of learnt my first lesson in my own business.
Yeah.
So I sort of picked up again and started my second company, which was a renewable energies business.
Yep.
And built that up.
And that would have been right around the time that solar was going pretty gangbusters.
Yes. Yeah. So I started the solar company right before those rebates really took hold.
Yep.
And we prided ourselves in designing bespoke systems for people's houses. And then all the fucking monkeys came out of the woodwork.
Yep.
And we were sort of like,
as they do when the government incentivizes something.
Correct. So this is one of those other like things that happened which really serendipitous and really lined me up for Bitcoin later.
Yeah.
Was at first I was a beneficiary of these malaligned government incentives, in an awkward sense because I didn't take full advantage of that shit. Like what I should have done was I should have just gone and installed 1.5 kilowatt systems, are like a pointless fucking system to put on a family home, but they were like the max
margin
rebate that you would get.
Yeah, right.
For the minimum system.
Yeah.
So as a company, you would only really have to bill the customer $1,500 or $2,000. The bulk of the money came from the rebate.
Yeah.
And it was about $6,500 or whatever it was. And you just fucking basically print money because you could just sell everybody a $2,000 system.
Yep.
And what we did was, me and my stupid fucking ethical bone was like, we would actually go and design a system that made sense for the customer long term. And we'd sell them, like a $20,000 system, which still only got the $6,000 rebate. So we was out there trying to like get $15,000 out of each customer.
When all their neighbors are paying $2,000.
Correct.
For solar.
For exactly. Yeah. And they think in their mind it's the same fucking shit. So we'd go and educate the customer, do all this sort of stuff. So it was a fucking grind, man. Like, here I am trying to be honest. And like, we were one of like 3 companies originally in our space, like in Wollongong, within a year, like we were one of 40 installers. Like every fuckwit just came out of the woodwork and just was putting solar systems like on the wrong side of the roof.
Yep.
And it was just one of those things where, the government just, maybe someone in government or there was actually genuinely trying to do something good.
Yep.
They were like, oh, it's good for the environment, this is, but, and I think we'll touch on this later, right? Theory versus practice is that the shit sounded good, but zero, I guess, execution capacity.
Yeah.
Like, just doing it at the wrong level.
Things just weren't thought through.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, they hadn't considered the game theory behind it, which is the biggest issue, the human factor.
Yeah. And man, we'll touch on game theory later around like Bitcoin and why it's so powerful versus, because it's got sound game theory.
So that was your second business, a solar business?
Correct. So that was sort of like the big one because, we were doing the right thing. So we hung around and look, we actually made good margins on a lot of the jobs because we, provided a superior service. We went for quality over quantity. And anyway, right toward the end of that, like, clusterfuck on that side of things as well. So the government cut the thing short because they were like, fucking, this is getting out of control. So if you don't have your system installed by the end of this month, it was like 3 weeks away, like you miss out on the rebate. So everyone went bonkers and we just installed a shitload of systems. And the downside effect of that was that basically the rebate value halved.
Wow.
And it halved like because the renewable energy certificates that the rebate was made up of, like basically the market was flooded and, they dropped from $40 down to like 18. So basically all of us idiots who went and installed all these systems and got like a couple grand out of the customer, the money that we were waiting on from the Rex was like 40 cents on the dollar and everyone went bankrupt basically. So, we had enough cash in the bank to sort of wind up and like pay off the employees and stuff like that. But I'd gotten myself in deep shit because I could sense something was coming because I was like, fuck, man, this just happened in installation. I was like, it's coming here. So I'd gone and looked for something I could do that was like just away from the fucking government. So I was like, all right, put some money in a gym. I went and bought LED lights because I still wanted to like keep the renewable energy thing going. But yeah, like I'd half paid for the container of LED lights. I'd half built the gym and then all of this shit blew up in my face. And I was like, fuck, can't finish the gym. I ain't paying the rest of the money for the LED lights because like everything was fucked. So anyway, I basically wound everything up. Like we tried to in vain finish the gym with this like really like high interest loan. It was a fucking mess. And yeah, so the gym ended up failing. And anyway, so that was all happening at the same time as like, I'd sort of set myself up for, with the gold and silver and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of, everything collapsed on one side. And I kind of got away with, not got away is the wrong word, but I kind of had made some smart moves with gold and silver and that just sort of gave me enough of a base. And at that point in time, I was like, fuck the world, fuck the government, fuck money, fuck everyone. And it was also around that time when I'd like watched, if you guys remember Zeitgeist with
yeah.
So I'd gone down that rabbit hole.
Fantastic
so like
series.
Yeah. Great series, but just wrong, like lack of solutions or wrong set of solutions for the problems at hand. So then I started becoming very like almost, I'll say it, anti-capitalist. I was like, fuck so I kind of self-sabotaged myself through that as well. Like I probably could have saved the business. I could have done all that sort of shit, but I kind of like nuked the whole lot because I just had enough. Anyway, I ended up becoming a fucking vegan.
Wow.
Yeah. Very interesting right now, right? Man, I went to LA, moved to Venice Beach, California for a bit.
So when was this on the timeline? Was this 2010, 2011?
2011, 2012.
2012, yeah, okay.
Somewhere around that. So there's a couple of years after.
So why'd you move over to LA?
Man, I was just searching for something. I had no idea. Like I was looking for something, went to Muscle Beach for a little bit. Like I had really no idea what the fuck I was doing, right? And
because it's not as nice as the pictures at Venice Beach.
No way in hell. And I still remember the first time I got there, like I rocked up to Santa Monica and I was like, Muscle Beach. And I was like, where's the weights? And until I realized there was actually Venice Beach. And I was like, fucking tourist.
There's people selling CDs everywhere.
Yeah, and I was like, everyone's homeless and shit. So
yeah.
Anyway, like I went and learnt to like dance salsa and all this sort of like weird shit that you just wouldn't expect from me, right?
Yeah, okay.
At this point in time in my life. So anyway, it was just a weird period. Like I went down like, weird philosophies and like really like Eastern sort of thinking and meditation and yoga and like, so basically a 180, like a polar opposite to like sort of my modality that I choose to live in today. And yeah, I spent about a year on and off like being a hippie, and I'd literally set up an entire plan where I was going to it basically all culminated into me buying a one-way ticket to Bali, and I was going to get lost in Indonesia and live off the land and come back in 5 years.
Fair dinkum.
Yeah, so I was like, I'd really gone off the fucking deep end. I was like...
Did you end up in Bali?
I did end up in Bali, and I had to buy a return ticket. And it was actually in Bali where everything changed.
Okay.
So where I actually met these 3 Russian models.
Right.
They changed everything.
In Bali.
In Bali. And
where in Bali was it?
I was getting ready to go in the mountains. So,
Okay. It's really nice up there.
It's beautiful, yeah. So I was 8 days through a water fast.
Okay.
So
what is a water fast entail?
no food, no anything, just water
Just
only.
water.
Yeah. So I was 8 days through, so I hadn't had a bit of food or anything. So anyway, and I saw these really hot girls at one of the cafes that I'd hang out, where I'd hang out at the cafe and drink water all day. Chatting to 3 models, and one of them, like, man, she was fucking smoking hot, like Jesus Christ. And she was from New York, and she kind of told me the story. So I told her about my story and how like I'd lost so much money on the markets, and then this whole solar thing blew up in my face and all this sort of stuff. And I guess I was being a victim, right?
Yeah.
And she kind of was like, yeah, all this sort of stuff. And she told me about her friend who was in New York, and he'd lost $60 million on the markets, and had spent a bunch of years sort of going through all that sort of shit, and he'd picked himself up at that point in time, and he was going forward. And so it was that conversation that made me feel about that significant. Like,
Wow.
For those who aren't watching, this is like, I felt about as significant as a fucking blade of grass, in a meadow, like zero significance. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And it was that. And then at the same time, like I'd picked up Arnold's book, Total Recall, from the airport. And I don't know why the fuck I picked it up. I just did. And I bought it, and I was sort of halfway through it, and just reading his story and the challenges and the trials and tribulations he went through. And he's like one of the people, like I have so much respect for Arnold. Like basically conquered 4 completely disparate fields throughout his life. Business, sport, acting, and government. Like, it's incredible. So reading that book, I just kind of looked at myself in the mirror one day. I was like, the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you running from? And I booked a ticket back, and got my hands dirty on the next thing.
So how did this all lead you to discovering Bitcoin and coming across that?
I'd heard about Bitcoin back in the gold and silver days, right? But I just dismissed the shit because I saw Max Kaiser jumping up and down on the couch, and I was like, what the fuck's this guy talking about? And at that point, like, I was starting to sort of have enough of that. There was, Doug Casey was still complaining about shit, and, Gerald Celente was still going on about the TSA, like rubbing him the wrong way, and, saying that the world's coming to an end, and like all the doom and gloomers basically, like, Mark Faber and like everyone. Like I was kind of like trying to get myself away from that. So I kind of, to my everlasting regret, kind of got away from Bitcoin, or got away from the environment in which I could have really discovered Bitcoin at an earlier point in time. So when I came back, I sort of, got into a bunch of random rackets. So like this health food chain, that I sort of helped build, sort of started as a frozen yogurt chain, morphed into this like health smoothie bar and all this sort of stuff. And, that was one stint that really, really, really didn't suit my personality. Right. I sort of got off being a vegan, went down the path of like really, and this is now like 2014. So like 5 years ago, and really kind of jumped on the paleo and whole foods and eating that sort of way. So I was always sort of like just a bit ahead of the trend, because at that point in time, like veganism was just getting big, and I was just getting the hell away from it. And being like, guys, it doesn't work. I swear. And yeah, like I ended up building this payroll automation app, which like I didn't code it myself, but I was kind of like quasi product owner. And sort of learned, like really got my first stripes of what it takes to build a software business. And
so were you working with like freelancers on like Odesk?
Yeah, a bunch of freelancers, you know, and putting them all together and trying to get them aligned and learning how, like what herding cats is like, and you know, how to take something out of your head and actually turn it into not only design, but code and product and function and for the user and all this sort of stuff. So I went through all of that stuff, and that was really when I went down the path of like learning about lean startup and things like hard thing about hard things and, you know, capital raising and, you know, that sort of side of things. Anyway, I built that up and sold it to some, you know, people like really cheap because I just had enough of dealing with that. And then took that experience and sort of rolled that into the next major startup. And this is sort of where I really earned my battle scars, was in a company called iRecruit. This is sort of where some people know me from, is I ended up on Shark Tank thinking that I was raising capital, you know, got my ego, you know, fucking definitely in the wrong place there.
Just for people who aren't from Australia, what is Shark Tank?
YouTube it. It's a show where you go on there and there's like a bunch of ex-entrepreneurs, current investors that you pitch in front of, and supposedly for raising capital for your business. It is not a capital raising event. It's a 1 hour segment for entertainment purposes. That's all it is.
So did it work for publicity?
I mean, maybe, you know, I got some notoriety out of it because like I was on there really, like I got on there and brawled with the investors.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear. Talk to us a little bit about what going on Shark Tank is actually like.
So when I got there, they basically pair you with the person who helps you basically script what you're going to say when you go in there. And they sort of try and come up with an angle that'll suit. And the angle they came up with was like, oh, look, so you know, you've already raised some money, you're already in business, so you're a little bit more sophisticated. Well, let's position you as the shark going into the Shark Tank. And so, you know, like they really set me up to look like an absolute moron. And here I am lapping this shit up, you know. I'm like, yeah.
Going into a room of very highly type A personalities, telling them that you're also one of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh man, like looking back on it now, I'm like, you moron. And the thing that we scripted to say of me walking in was like, just made it sound so arrogant. And I can't even remember what I said, but it was like, yeah, you know, we've raised this capital already, and you know, we're coming in here. We don't really need the money, but I'm just here to tell them how it is. You know, I feel like I'm going to be a shark, and so you know, we scripted this really just arrogant fucking thing.
Yeah,
and like I even felt like it would be arrogant at the time, but she's like, no. She goes, the audience will love it. You know, blah blah blah, and I was like, all right. So I said this shit. Walked in there. It was really funny because I walked in and they hadn't got the cameras ready yet. So when you walk in at first, you're just standing there on this like X. They say like walk into the room, and it's like you walk through this corridor like where there's like imagery on the walls of like sharks. And it's like this really ominous sort of like lighting and shit. And you walk into these big ass fucking doors and you step into this, again, this ominous sort of feeling room at this X in the middle of this sort of like, you know, stage area. And you got to stand there and just like sort of look at everyone. And the funny thing was like, just to make things more awkward was I walked in and they're like, I'm sort of standing there just like looking at the judges and like smiling, waiting. And they're like, it's going to take 2 or 3 seconds. And I'm waiting. It's like 10 seconds past. There's like this awkward silence and they're like, get him out. We got to do it again. So I'm like, fucking hell. So went back out and did that whole walk again with the camera following me along.
Oh, jeez.
Stepped on that thing again. Awkward smile. It's like, and action.
Oh.
So get up and, you know, hit my pitch. And then, you know, Steve Baxter sort of, you know, who's really bought into his personality on the show, does his usual asshole thing.
I've heard he's like that all the time.
Well, basically, he's basically bought into his persona in real life.
Yeah.
I don't know. He doesn't seem like a very happy individual, but whatever. I couldn't give 2 fucks about him. So we sort of got into a bit of a tussle on the show, like, because he's like, I was explaining what we'd done to date and the capital we'd spent to date and the product we'd spent to date and, you know, the iterations we'd gone through and everything. And he's like, you spent how much money and you haven't got a product yet, you haven't got customers yet, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, look, you know, we've been iterating. He's like, have you ever heard of lean methodology or something like that? And I said something back, which was really smart ass. That was like a framework in that. Have you ever heard of this? And he just sort of went red and he was like, no, you know, I'm out. And we just sort of, each time I was trying to answer a question from one of them, someone else would just like butt in with a question halfway through. So I couldn't answer any questions. So I'm like halfway through. And then I get like from one of them, they're like, you just don't want to listen, do you? And I'm like, okay, well, can you give me a chance to like answer a question?
Yeah.
Anyway, I walked out of there thinking, fuck, what have I just done?
Yeah.
Because I also went there without board approval.
Okay.
Well, I had board approval up until the day before.
Yeah.
And the board changed their mind. They're like, look, we don't want you to go. We think it's going to be a bad idea. And I just like, because I'd gotten prepped. I'd gotten through like all the auditions. And so in my mind, I was like, man, I got to be there. I was like, this is going to be publicity.
On TV.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be good for us. So anyway, I kind of wish I listened to them, but I didn't. And when the show finally went live, like I think it was like, it was funny. Channel 10 almost went bankrupt between the time like I went to the show and that happened.
Yeah.
So the show actually aired after I'd sort of been, I'd you know, that event caused some friction with me and the board, and you know, it sort of ultimately resulted in me having a real like they tried to bring unnecessary controls in the company that didn't align with the direction of where, you know, I had originally intended the company to go. So we sort of had these real philosophical disagreements, and, you know, I stepped down from the company, they took it over, they ran it in their own direction, and, you know, the company ended up going to liquidation and all this sort of stuff. So I, you know, as far as I know, they sort of tried to revive it, phoenix it or whatever they did, and, you know, take it, do their own thing. But as far as I know, that the things never worked, and, you know, nothing that they ever did, you know, actually happened.
So iRecruit, what was the concept behind iRecruit?
The basic concept was recruitment's broken. People are always placed in roles where they don't actually fit, or that's not aligned to their personality. So I took a lot of the inspiration that I'd had from like neurolinguistics and, you know, just studying psychology and behavior and all that sort of stuff. And I wanted to, well, me and Todd, who was my co-founder, we wanted to build kind of like a Tinder for jobs that used behavioral profiling, skills, experience, and all that sort of stuff to place someone in a role that's more suited for who they are.
Wow.
And we try to build a matching algo, you know, for that. And we try to do away with resumes. We try to do away with job ads, and we try to get like employers on one side, you know, help them define who the ideal candidate is for a role without advertising the job. So just creating that, you know, basically creating that persona. And then on the candidate side, helping them build their persona without putting a resume out and without applying for jobs. And then the algo would basically match them. So you may not even be looking for X job, but it would come up in your feed because it matched who you were, your skills, etc. So then, and then the idea was that they could both swipe right, and if they both swipe right, they'd connect, and it'd allow them to then start a conversation. It was a really, really cool concept.
Yeah. So I mean, you said that you don't think it's worked up until now. No one's been able to make it work.
Oh man, what I learned was two-sided marketplace is really hard.
Yeah.
So what we found was that the problem we had was we'd raised like, you know, $500,000-$600,000, but, you know, the money you need to really get a two-sided marketplace off the ground is extraordinary.
Right.
Like, you know, you need 20, 30, 40, $50 million to really get something like that going and build this.
Was it a data problem? Like, was it?
No, it's a saturation problem, because if you've got no candidates on there, what employer is going to come and like go and spend time and effort building
chicken and egg?
That exactly. That's really what it is.
Yeah, you're seeing with that with some of there's a new drive or ride sharing service that's in Brisbane, but they need to get the drivers and the riders.
So that's why I see those kind of products are really winner take all. So this is probably an interesting anecdote, is that this is where I really learnt about network effects and how those things happen, which also helps me really appreciate Bitcoin even more, is that, you know, something like Uber is really a winner take all or winner take most type of market. And to win in that space man, you need to throw, like, I read a stat somewhere in the early days when Uber was launching in Brisbane. Like, to launch in Brisbane, they had to dump $25 million on marketing here just to, like, really, at the same time, build drivers and riders and incentivize the fuck out of both of them to just get that initial critical mass. And once you pass a specific critical mass, the product becomes self-sustaining, and it actually, the value of the network becomes less about the product and more about the actual network, which is really interesting. So, what we were lacking was just, I guess, the sophistication or the expertise to go out and, you know, raise that sort of capital was really my first tech startup and all of that. So I really, you know, I can say, looking back on it now, I had no fucking idea what I was doing. And also there was a lot of whiplash from the board, and, you know, we had an oversized board because one of the investors wanted to have, like, this, you know, massive board for corporate
oversight.
Yeah, exactly. So we were sort of like,
which works at a high level, you know.
Correct.
Works for maybe those $60 million companies.
Correct.
Yeah.
For us, it was like we were top heavy.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and especially after my little shenanigan at Shark Tank, you know, like they then tried to bring in a head of operations who was this absolute muppet who had no idea about, like, running a startup. So then he started, like, coming in with, like, his idea of bringing systems in was sending the guys home at 5 p.m. Right. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you know, we're trying to run a startup. He's like, no, don't, you know, you've got to empower me to put the systems in place.
Right.
And, like, just started burning the culture up, and, like, it was just a mess. Like, there was probably... There was a bunch of other hires that we probably should have done at the time that would have been much more important than him, and that wouldn't have stepped on my feet. But you know what? I can also probably say at this point in time, I was also too arrogant to, you know, maybe accept the feedback that I needed.
Yep.
And I was, like, really adamant about, you know, keeping the young talent and all this sort of stuff. So, you know, there was mistakes on all fronts.
Yeah,
you know, they made mistakes. I made mistakes. You know, we butted heads, and, you know, the shit blew up in our face. But that was my catalyst to find Bitcoin. So, and you know, because coming out of that, like, I was pretty distraught because I'd spent 2 years, like, I genuinely put my heart and soul in it. I didn't draw a single wage. Yeah. I mean, I even paid for half my fucking travel out of my own pocket. That was, like, purely business travel. So I'd spent all sorts of money on that shit. I had not drawn a wage for 2 years. I spent all my savings. I even invested all my money in the company. So all this sort of stuff. So I was pretty pissed, you know, out the back end of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, coming out of that, I was like, the writing was on the wall, like, before everything blew up. So I sort of knew. So I wasn't explicitly looking for what I was going to do next, but my mind was open to something else. Yeah. And, you know, someone mentioned Bitcoin again, and I was like, fuck, is that thing still around?
Yeah.
And sort of looked into it, and at that point in time, I was like, you know, $600 or something. I was like, fucking what the hell? Like, because the last time I'd heard of it was like $10 or something, or, you know, $30 or 50 or whatever it was. Like, I was like, holy crap. Yeah. And anyway, then you know, the proverbial rabbit hole appeared.
You took the red pill,
basically, man. Yeah. I just sort of stumbled down that shit.
So what did that look like? Because, I mean, we know you now as, you know, one of the most prolific writers on Bitcoin. Obviously, you're running a Bitcoin company, but you know that sounds like the point where you dove headfirst in and you really gave it a good look. Apart from the price, obviously, what attracted you to it first of all? How'd that exploration look for you?
Yeah, well, I think multiple things. So, like, if we look back to you know, the elements. So I think at that point I was dirty with the world anyway, and I felt like my money had been stolen and all this sort of stuff. So I was like, what else is out there? What can I do? Like, what's interesting? And I think, like, I would have to credit Antonopoulos was, like, really the voice that got me, like, interested. Like, I stumbled on one of his videos. Like, I still remember in the early days, like, so during that whole iRecruit journey and all that sort of stuff, I'd, like, heard of Bitcoin again, and I remember watching some doco, like, or a segment of a doco, and I saw that moron Roger Ver crying about babies and shit, and I was like, fuck, these idiots, like, what's wrong with these idiots? So I dismissed Bitcoin the first time because I was too busy with gold and silver. I dismissed it the second time because I saw a moron crying, and I was like, these guys are fucked. And it was the third time where I finally heard someone intelligent talking about it, and I was like, fuck, I resonate with that concept. I resonate with that concept. I resonate with that concept. You know, I'd already at this point, like, so throughout my life, I've always been an avid reader. So, you know, during that period of iRecruit, like I'd really spent time, you know, delving deeper into human psychology, anthropology, how we've evolved as a species, as a society, shared fictions and all this sort of stuff. And there was elements of, you know, that thesis that came out in a lot of Andreas's talks. And I was like, fuck, there's something more here. And I just kept digging, kept sort of, you know, researching and trying to understand it. And yeah, but basically what I uncovered was that this thing is so much bigger than what I thought. And by the time I'd really uncovered that, like the whole, you know, Ethereum really started to take off. And then, you know, I was like, oh, what's Ethereum? And I sort of went down that rabbit hole. And in the early days, like I fucking loved Ethereum. I thought this thing was brilliant. Like, I mean, you were there as well. Like we've all sort of been there. Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, the ICOs came out, and then initially I thought that was fucking brilliant. And it was really, ICOs were the tipping point for me to really become a strong Bitcoiner, because it was like I've got a real sense of like first principles thinking because of, you know, the background that I've had in math and engineering and all of that. So like engineering is really about first principles. It's effectively what it is. And I still remember, and I say this story to everyone, is like there was a point in time. So during that whole journey, I was like going out there telling everyone to buy crypto, buy Bitcoin, do, you know, this and that, and everyone, like it was always in the too hard basket for everyone. And that's sort of where I came up with the idea of Amber, which was originally called Stash. And you know, it was during that time where I considered doing an ICO for Stash, and you know, everyone was like, man, I'd throw fucking 50 grand at that, you know, all this sort of stuff. And like I was like, all right, screw it, you know, I'll do it. Like I'm going to start writing a white paper. I went and grabbed all these white papers, and I spent a weekend in Byron, you know, trying to understand this whole new landscape of like this incredible new way of raising capital. And like, you know, I walked out of that Byron Bay trip 20 IQ points dumber because like I couldn't believe the shit I was reading. I was like, what the fuck are these people selling? There's nothing here. They're printing money out of thin air. And that was like the first thing that broke my faith in the whole thing. I was like, fucking hell, this is another Ponzi scheme. Like, cause I'd really, you know, during that initial period, like I'd spent time inquiring on what the hell happened in 2008. Like the, you know, the Ponzi that the financial system became, and like the crap on crap on crap that we were selling. Like this thing just felt so reminiscent. And like looking at the prices and how everything was moving, I was like, holy fucking shit. Like this is, you know, there's people here using the Bitcoin narrative, which is this narrative about, you know, not equality, but equalizing, you know, access, and, you know, and making money sound again, and, you know, decentralizing and all this. They took all the fucking buzzwords and they slapped them on basically things that made QE look normal. Like,
so true.
You know, at least there was some, you know, framework in what the Fed did. Like this was out of control, money printing by deranged morons, like who had no concept of what they were doing. And yeah, man, like I could almost credit ICOs to making me a Bitcoin maxi, because at that point in time, like I just got so angry. Then I started questioning like Ethereum's basis. I was like, fuck, if this is what Ethereum was designed for, this is fucking retarded. Then I started questioning like the whole, because Ethereum's narrative just kept changing. Like it was, you know, whatever it was in the beginning, like DAOs in the beginning, then it was like the world computer, and like always had something wrong with the world computer, because I was like, well, how many things really need to be built on some global world computer that need to be decentralized, costly, and that must not be stopped? I was like, well, I don't know, maybe an eBay for terrorists, you know, like a hooker's site, you know, like I was like, you know, not really many things. Like, like the cost benefit ratio didn't make sense to me. So, you know, my you know, the cracks really started to appear for me, and then, you know, the towards the end of 2017, like there was shit being said by people like Vitalik that I just like, and then their stance on like proof of work, particularly because I really found proof of work interesting from a probabilistic standpoint, and like the game theory around proof of work, and the fact that, you know, what we've developed with Bitcoin is this, you know, this unforgeable unit, which effectively transforms energy into a unit that we can collectively verify and agree upon and all this sort of stuff. So it just started being so profound. And then these idiots started to talk about proof of stake and saying that proof of work is just stupid and, you know, it's too expensive and it's going to blow up. They're like, just all of this incoherent noise. And I mean, you probably saw me in the early days being very like Bitcoin heavy. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, started to be like, oh, you know, Aleks is just a naysayer. And yeah, I just started getting louder and louder about my opinions, and then put pen to paper because, you know, I think I've always been relatively good at, you know, putting forth like a coherent argument about things. And then, yeah, some of my articles started, you know, getting I wouldn't say they went viral, but, you know, they got pretty popular, you know, and then I was getting published on Hacker Noon and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, that's sort of, you know, whilst all of that was happening, you know, I you know, formed a plan to build the next business, which was, you know, now what we call Amber. And, you know, sort of here we are today.
Wow. So before we get into Amber, you mentioned just earlier that Bitcoin was bigger than you thought it was. Now, what does that mean for you?
Oh, shit. What does it not mean? I guess every time I feel like I've come to this new profound understanding of Bitcoin, you know, and I look back on my prior understanding, I was like, fuck, I was dumb. Now I know. And then 3 weeks later, I'm like, fuck, I was dumb. Now I know. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So like there's a really good, have you guys heard of Gigi?
No.
He's a writer. I mean, he's a coder writer. He's sort of like pseudonymous dude on Twitter. Just Gigi. But his Twitter handle is DER, so Dare Gigi, or so DERGIGI. So he's written sort of this thing called like the 21 lessons he's learnt from Bitcoin, and like if you can pull it up, Matt, like we can sort of talk to a couple of those. So Gigi, if you're listening to this, love you, bro, and I'm just gonna, you know, shout your ass out here on this. But I think it's like his thing is a really good model around how profound Bitcoin is. So he talks about how, you know, Bitcoin redefines not just money, but it redefines time, it redefines locality. So like, for example, if I asked you, where do you hold your Bitcoin? Like, can you actually answer that question?
Yikes. No. I mean, you've got a place where there's a wallet, but that's not where your Bitcoin is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like I've got a friend of mine who takes his mnemonic seed phrase, and for each word, he takes a photo with that word, and then he creates a collage, and it's in his room, and his fucking seed phrase is right there. No one's ever going to guess that that's where. So, but is that where the Bitcoin is? I don't know. Not really. Like, so there's like, so Bitcoin's like really profound. It's turned the concept of money into like ephemeral information almost. It's insane. Yeah, there we go. Beautiful. So, yeah, the concept of free speech, the concept of value, money, sound money, you know, he's got in here. So I love his how he's termed the immaculate conception of Bitcoin, like this idea that, you know, it was this thing that came from nowhere, you know, really was dismissed, and it like that those formative years were like really. No one would have guessed that. You can't replicate that shit. And then the founder disappeared. Like, it's just, that's the kind of shit myths are made of. Like, and
it's funny that he's used immaculate conception there, because there's a lot of parallels.
Exactly. That's why he uses it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why he uses it, because that's so. When people talk about, oh yeah, well, you know, what if someone makes a bit of Bitcoin? You know, it's like that's the elements that they're missing. Yeah. Like particularly that immaculate conception bit. You cannot go and replicate that initial formative phase of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
it's impossible.
Well, let's focus in on that particular because that has resonated through nearly every piece I've seen you write. That's resonated within nearly every presentation I've seen you present. Is that it's not just about one thing with Bitcoin that can be replicated. Yes. It's not just about being better. There's a complete package to Bitcoin, a number of different elements that go into it that make you very confident that there's not going to be another Bitcoin,
Correct.
like people say.
Yeah. Like I was on a podcast with this dude a couple of weeks ago, and he was asking me, what about, he said something about, the governments, they're going to take the best parts of Bitcoin and make something better. And I was like, well, what do you define as better? Like, what they're gonna create some network with faster payments? Like, define better. Like, are they gonna create a censorship resistant network that's not run by anyone? Is that what they're gonna give us? Like, so better in what context? Like, so it's like,
I mean, if the governments were what we thought they were, they might.
yeah. Well, I mean, by definition, they won't though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, because because someone can't give you that. Like, you need to get the fuck out of the way to give you what Bitcoin is. So yeah, like when I look at Bitcoin, like it's one of these, what I kind of call it like a complex emergent phenomena. It's like I introduced what I called like the Bitcoin recipe in that talk in 2017, 2018, which was, you've got game theory, networking, computer science, blocks of data hashed together, economic incentive, disincentives, like all of these elements combined together in this unique recipe. You then take that recipe and it sort of happened at exactly the right time with, the spirit of the time was right. The essence of the people who first touched it was perfect. And this is sort of where this immaculate conception piece comes out. There's all of these random elements that were just perfect for what Bitcoin would today become. That allowed it to pick up that initial traction, that allowed it to be relatively well distributed in the early days. Like we are still like now learning about how profound it was, how profound just the issuance rate is.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like, people are like, oh, so why did he start with, why is it an asymptotic curve? Why wasn't it just linear? Well, if it was linear, that extra incentive in the early days to like give people a reason to try and, mine this shit whilst it was collectible, or whilst it was a collectible, wouldn't have happened. So like there's just the things and the way it's sort of rolled out and evolved from the early days. That is the piece that's, irreplaceable and it's non-replicatable. And when you then start to take some of the elements of, convergent network effects, or convergent networks such as money or communication, you sort of apply that alongside this immaculate conception and this thing that's sort of formed and grown organically, and that has all of the participants who are at different levels, whether you're a validator, miner, node operator, whatever, everyone's got skin in the game. Everybody has skin in the fucking game. And whilst working in their own self-interest, they're working for the interest of the whole. So we've got this first time in history where the the collective or the commons, is actually aligned, which is fucking wild because we've never had that before. So you get all of that stuff, and then you slap on these convergent network effects like money, for example. Money is most functional when everybody is using the same unit of money. It's why we have $1 Australian in Australia. It's why we have $1 US in the US. Like in a specific jurisdiction, money converges to unity because that's when it's useful. And then what also makes that happen at a faster rate, particularly with like, I guess this is less important with money by decree and more important with emergent money that sort of emerges as a market good, is that the one with the most early utility as a broadly accepted store of value or is the one that starts to pick up the most liquidity in the early days, and the one that picks up the most liquidity is where more capital flows, and the one that particularly in Bitcoin's case, the one where more capital flows then incentivizes more validators and participants into the network, and it literally at each point in time just is this almost like a black hole. It just sucks more participants in, sucks more capital in it. It then makes this network more secure, and it starts to effectively become this runaway train that nobody's going to catch. Like so at this point in time, for every year that Bitcoin grows, any new starter or like any better than Bitcoin network is going to need 10, 11 years of that same complex sort of, growth and immaculate conception and, all of these variables. And it needs to be like fucking 100x, better or more profound than what Bitcoin is. Man, the chances of that happening in our lifetime, or at least the next few generations or 5 or 10 generations, I think is practically nil. And I guess the final piece for me, which really just nails Bitcoin down for me, is like the fact that it's taken the one unit or the one concept in the universe effectively, which is energy. Energy is the one thing that is unforgeable, unreplicatable. Like it's taking actual fucking energy and it's converting it into digital immutability and digital scarcity. I don't know how you can beat that. Like I'm yet to fucking understand in any way, shape or form in my mind how we're going to develop something superior to that until we transcend energy and maybe start operating across the multiverse. I don't know, but I'm pretty damn sure that ain't going to happen in my lifetime or yours or my damn kids or any of them.
That's
so
right.
like Bitcoin's pretty fucking good for now and for the foreseeable future. Like these idiots talking about, what's going to supersede Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They have no sense of how long this sort of a cycle will actually be.
And maybe talk to that a little bit more, because one of the big things that we've heard, particularly in the last couple of years in the crypto world, is that Bitcoin isn't adapting fast enough. Bitcoin isn't, the transaction fees are too high because it's too slow and they haven't adapted it fast enough. We can't buy our coffees with it anymore, blah, blah, blah. But one thing that I've heard you talk about, which is very, very interesting and kind of resonates very well with that concept, is that it's not really about that. It's not about how fast these things go. It's about building a solid foundational layer.
Yeah.
So maybe, and then other things can be built on top of that. But maybe talk to that a little bit more as well.
Well, I think so. I put up a tweet a little while ago, which was, in a world of extremely high time preferences, where everyone's become basically a junkie for now. Meaning I want my Netflix hit now. I want my sugar hit now. I want my laugh hit now. I want my fucking alcohol hit now. Whatever it is, like the concept of patience has gone out the window, and the concept of like low time preferences and investing for the future has completely gone out the window. And we've skewed our concept of adoption. Like the word adoption gets thrown around by, like, I was at this blockchain conference the other week, which was just this like it was a circle jerk. Like it was the same people saying the same shit over and over again, just throwing words around like adoption and enterprise and blockchain and this, not having any clue what they're talking about. And I think you were at that meetup where I first like brought up, how do we measure adoption in Bitcoin? The measurement for adoption in Bitcoin is not many people are buying a fucking coffee, for fuck's sake. Like who gives a shit about that? That's not what Bitcoin is designed for. Like digital immutability is about like literally time is immutable. Like that's the one thing we cannot reverse. Like the world, the universe, as far as we understand, moves forward in time. We might be able to compress time, because of speed and all of that sort of stuff and mass, but we can't reverse it. The digital world has always been able to be reversed because there was no cost, in that space. So Bitcoin's in an extraordinarily profound way, like bridged the two realms and effectively brought this concept of forward moving time in the digital realm, where it becomes improbable or more and more improbable as time goes by to reverse time in the digital realm, and everything probabilistically converges to moving forward in time. We saw that with the the whole Binance hack, and they were talking about reverse bullshit. They were never going to reverse it. B, the game theory worked, which was, had they attempted to reverse or even got an inkling of success in that manner, it would have undermined the very thing that they're building on. So the game theory works. Like all these idiots talking about, they theoretically could have done it. Yeah. That's not what game theory is. Game theory is how does it work in practice. So when I look at Bitcoin like that, we're seeing this profound thing, and there's people talking about, how many people are using it for coffees? Well, my question is, how many people are actually storing wealth on this thing. That's what matters. And we as a society or as a species have learnt to store wealth on objects or units or artifacts or collectibles that don't change, that stay the same over a period of time. So this is why as a society we converged over time to a consensus that gold was the best form of money. Why? Not just because it's fucking yellow and shiny, but because it had attributes that made it a good object to be imbued with store of value properties. It was inert. You could pass it down from generation to generation. Gold in Asia is the same as in Africa, is the same as in Europe, is the same as in the Americas. So it had all of these elements. It was recognizable, et cetera, et cetera. So it had all these elements of what a good money is. So Bitcoin embodies those concepts so well. And, I guess I'll touch on Lindy effect here, is the longer it's around. So the concept of a Lindy effect is the longer something is around, the stronger it gets. Money is a thing, technology, consensus, shared fiction, whichever way you want to define money, is this concept that gets stronger with time and the longer it's there, because money is fundamentally shared fiction. And then the thing we use for money can be something completely fictional like fiat. Or the most functional money is something that does have objective elements that allow money to function like a good, that we can build robust collective consensus around, instead of just the fluffy fucking idea, which is what fiat is. So coming back to that, I think that's really where the narrative of Bitcoin is so powerful, is that they have optimized for the things that matter, which is consistency, stability, self-sovereignty, censorship resistance, uninflatability. Like the fact that it's fixed supply, and the consensus rules imply that I can go and create my own fucking Bitcoin Alex's version tomorrow, or someone said you should go create Bitcoin Svetski's version. So that'll be my Bitcoin SV.
Bitcoin SV, yeah.
I'll go brawl with Craig Wright. He'll probably sue me for infringement.
All you got to do is go edit a few of your old forum posts.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be like, look, I said this first.
And get audited by the AFP.
Yeah, like I can go and do that, but no one's going to follow me. Like, the power of Bitcoin is that this concept of like opt in, opt out, and it's when you opt in and agree to those consensus rules that you're a part of the network and you're in, and it's a non-violent in. No one's forcing you.
Yep.
It's a non-violent out. Like, man, there's just, I could go into a bunch of rants here as well. Like, how that sort of reminds me of like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and stuff like that. So I know, happy to go into that.
Let's explore that a little bit, because I mean that is a big piece of the Bitcoin puzzle. Is that it's a decentralized, open source network where no one is king.
Yep,
and it is almost pure free market.
Correct. It is. It's the closest thing to pure free market capitalism as possible. Like I've not in anything I've ever seen. Like I was catching up with a friend of mine who I'm trying to. Well, I'm saying now conversion is complete. So she says she's a traditional economist, and I've put her through conversion therapy, and she is now a Bitcoiner.
She's woke.
She's woke, no longer broke, and like she's full messaging me and stuff. Like she's like, oh, this, that, So, wait, hold on. What were we just talking about just before I said that? Ayn Rand. There was a point.
Pure free market.
Yes, pure free market. So we were talking about Australian economics, and she was talking about like the elements and the core tenets, and I said, look, all of this has been theory because as a society, like, we've gotten close to understanding what a truly capitalist sort of framework would look like. We've been lacking the tool. Gold was nowhere near good enough to allow for something like the Australian School of Economics, as an example, to really flourish and to be able to function in society. Like, because at the end of the day, every form of money that we were going to introduce would have in some way, shape or form concentrated. Anyway, so like this is the first time we've been able to actually separate, and this is, I'll say this here, is the fight in our generation and this century and this decade is going to be the fight for the separation of money and state, right?
Yes.
So and we'll get into that later, but Bitcoin was the missing piece for all of these more robust, discussions around a truly capitalist system that rewards production, that rewards skill, that rewards input, and
energy.
Energy, exactly. Work, right? Again, we come back
Proof
to that
of
concept.
work.
Proof of fucking work. The only thing that allows for something like that is a system that is fundamentally fixed in supply, fixed in nature. Like the analogy I use, and this is sort of what got her over the line, because we're talking about inflation versus deflation. I said, let's transcend that argument and let's just talk about, the energy in the universe. Can we create more energy? No, we can't. Can we destroy energy? No, we can't. Energy is fixed. So if energy is related to work, and work is fundamentally related to the input in society, and society is just a function of the inputs all of the participants put into it, then you can logically, through first principles, deduce that the best form of money, which is the unit through which we measure work and input, should also be fixed. Like, and that is such a solid argument. And she was like, holy fucking shit. And as I was saying it, I was like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah, like I'm going to write an article on this.
Exactly. Well, I am actually writing it. So I started writing an article a little while ago saying that B equals C, which is, the Bitcoin symbol equals C, which is, the symbol for the speed of light, which is this fixed constant that we can finally use in the world, in society, in physics, basically, to start measuring things that we've never been able to properly measure before because everything's been so messy. So anyway, we've sort of gone on 10 tangents there. So let's close the first loop, which was just prior to Ayn Rand. What was I saying? Because I'm going everywhere here.
We're talking about you mentioned Austrian economics. We both know what Austrian economics is. If you had to summarize Austrian economics in a few sentences.
Where's Stefan Livero when you need him? It's a set of models which talk about low touch economics. So the less input from centrally planned sort of, whether it's authorities or bureaucracies or whatever, the more wide you set the goalposts for an economy to operate, and it's all predicated on having a free market for money, particularly. So again, this is why Bitcoin's so important for Austrian economics, because we've never had a free market for money, really. Like outside of gold, and which was the best we could do in a physical world. But I guess if we're moving into a digital world, which we continually are, like we're going to need something better. So it's an economic system that is predicated on the idea of a free market money. That's not priced by anyone, where regulations and rules are as wide as possible, such that capitalism is really the driver. That now remember what we're talking about. We're talking about Bitcoin being the only system that rewards production. So anyway, this will tie in really nicely with Austrian economics, which is the idea that it's production, it's work, it's input that's valuable, and Bitcoin's this system that incentivizes that, and the game theory disincentivizes fraudulent or bad actor behavior. There's no rent seeking in the Bitcoin space. You can't go and just hang out and add layers of bureaucracy onto the Bitcoin network so that you can earn more Bitcoin. Like, it doesn't exist. So it starts to really fuck with the way that
you can't fractionally lend on the Bitcoin network itself.
Yeah, it's a real it's a real spanner in the works for the existence.
And I guess in your words, why is that a good thing? Because obviously we're living in a time. It's really interesting that you say that the fight in our time will be for the separation of money and state, because from what most there is definitely a groundswell of voluntarist / anarchist / libertarian people who believe that we've gone the wrong direction in emerging into the modern age with the same ruling structures we've had for human history, essentially, that we should be shedding those shackles as well. But those kind of people are in the minority. It seems like the majority of people are looking to the state more for things like this. And for them to hear that we think it may be a good idea for us to be going the other direction and separating money away from those traditional custodians of that we've grown up with for money, that could be quite jarring. So, and Austrian economics is an extension of that as well.
Correct,
And that's why a lot of people aren't fans of it.
Correct.
Because it's very different. It's very scary.
Yep.
You got to take responsibility for what you do.
Yes.
So I guess in your words, why is that important? You know, why should people who are our age and people who are coming in to this Bitcoin thing, why should they be fighting for a separation of money and state?
Well, let's so you touched on the word responsibility,
Yep.
which I think was the loop we didn't also tie prior to that one, which was the time preference concept, which is, you know, we're in this world of like the instant hit, right? And what we're doing is we're constantly chasing the next high without appreciating that the idea of good things take time, you know, and that, you know, effort and work is what matters, and, you know, production for the long term, etc. So like what we're doing is we're basically pushing shit up a steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper hill, and we're just throwing debt. Like if I use an analogy for software, like, you know, most people have heard of tech debt or technical debt. Is, you know, people write really fucking scrappy code just to get something built and get it out the door.
MVPs.
Exactly, MVPs. Then they build, you know, shit on shit on shit on shit until they get to the point where the whole thing falls over, you know, or, you know, in the case of a lot of shit exchanges, like something gets hacked and everything comes undone. Is every shortcut has a price. And we've sort of moved into this world where everything we do is so shortcut oriented because we want everything now. And that is a function of, you know, the way this inflationary system that we live in has been designed or has come about, you know, maybe more accurately, is the resource we have through which we measure the work and input we put into society is constantly losing purchasing power. So we are incentivized to go and run forward without fucking regard, chase yield. You know, we've all got to learn to be traders and investors and invest in shit we have no fucking clue about, instead of working on the things that actually we care about and that matter. You know, we can't feel safe putting our, you know, the wealth that we've earned. We can't store it anywhere at the moment.
And particularly not with these new cash laws that are coming.
Exactly, yeah. Like everything's becoming quicksand around us because we're in this perpetual race against each other and against ourselves for the next sugar high that is losing potency every time, you know, we hit a new sugar high. So the effects are becoming less and less and less. So what we're basically heading towards is like what I sort of said about that tech debt, is these things can only extend for so long. And, you know, all natural systems come back to equilibrium at some point in time. And we're just sort of moving so far past the equilibrium that it's, you know, just not funny anymore. So why is this important for people our age? Is a very interesting question. So multiple things I can touch on there. Number one, it's quite contrarian at the moment, as you mentioned. You know, it's jarring for most people. You know, I always have been a fan of being a contrarian in the way I think. And contrarianism isn't, you know, about just saying the fucking opposite thing. It's about finding something that the masses believe in, but that the masses are believing in because they've heard it's a good idea. They haven't explored the first principles of the substance beneath it. Like it's an ideology upon an ideology upon an ideology. You know, like equality is one of those examples. Like it sounds really nice in principle, but in practice, you know, the only way to get equality is to force people into equality and to fucking use violence. It's a really fucking dumb idea, actually. So, you know, being contrarian is really important. So in a world where sugar hits and, you know, the next high is what everybody's doing, being patient and having a low time preference and spending the time to build quality over just fucking blind rampant quantity will set you apart. And setting yourself apart is, you know, important in any sense. Number one. Number two is that, you know, this sort of slow motion train wreck can only last like so long. Like, the time to pay the piper will come. And the question is, like, at that point in time when, you know, wealth starts to really disintegrate for a lot of people, because the wealth that we've sort of supposedly built over the last 10 years and potentially even 100 years is largely just made up on those ideologies upon ideologies. There's very little substance there. So who's going to be the person holding a unit that is unconfiscatable, uninflatable, and uncompromisable? Like, is that not going to be a better place to store the wealth, which is effectively the conversion of the, you know, the input you put into society? So that's another big element there. And I think finally, I'll end on this analogy, at least for this section, is the idea that, what's fundamentally wrong with the system now is if you or I go out and we start a business, or we got to, court someone to date them, or, we set up a friendship, by and large, taking randomness out of the equation, because, sometimes randomness comes in and just, you can do all the right things and shit still blows up in your face, right? But, by and large, you do the right thing and you get rewarded. Like, you make good investment, you get rewarded. You do a dumb thing, like, you spit in your girlfriend's face for no fucking reason, or, you forget to pick her up or whatever, your relationship ain't going to last long, right? Or, you make bad investments, you're going to lose money. So there's consequences to doing bad things and there's rewards for doing good things. So fundamentally, nature is built on this, again, at first principle, nature is built on this incentive, disincentive system. This is, if anyone's read The Selfish Gene by it's Dawkins, right?
Yeah.
Is this idea that, evolution has come about through incentives, disincentives. It's how we function. Pleasure and pain is incentive, disincentive. So the only mechanism in society or in the universe that exists that this doesn't apply to is basically governments and central banks, which is, they go out and they make a bet, and then, sometimes they make a good bet and they make money. And more often than not, they just make a really fucking bad bet or a dumb decision and whatever. They don't pay for it. Like, we pay for it through taxes or through inflation or through the manipulation of interest rates or through more fucking laws or through more regulation or through more oligopolies or through more, like, it's basically, it doesn't exist in any other natural system except for our deranged fucking human species who have sat there and, a couple of us have decided that it's fair for the few to have a extraordinarily unfair advantage with zero accountability over everybody else.
Spot on.
Yeah. And I'm not here to sit here and be the fucking champion for the little person, all that sort of shit. Like let me take that out of the equation at the moment. This isn't, just fucking I'm some saint with some altruistic thing. Like, I'm inherently selfish and, I give a fuck about myself and I want to be the best that I can be, because if I'm the best that I can be, I can add more value to society and I can be of more use. And, that's a recursive sort of feedback loop to me then caring more about myself, and the people that I care about, etc. So, that's functional because that's natural. Whereas the world that we live in today is like really fucking skewed and we've got all these random distortions. Like, people are wondering why there's such an income gap. It's a lot of those people who are super filthy rich are not there thanks to some profound, input to society and productivity that they've, added or that they've had. They're there because they've been a rent seeker, or they've known a rent seeker that's managed to build a moat, not of better innovation, but of more complex fucking regulation. So the innovation in society has now become who can create the most convoluted, most fucked up regulatory framework such that, the people who are close enough to the center can maintain an edge whilst everybody else can't. So now we're effectively disincentivizing productivity, honesty, hard work, innovation, and we're incentivizing stupidity, laziness, rent seeking, complexity, and all of the crap that we've got. So Bitcoin just drives a stake into all of that.
Wow. Yeah.
That's my rant.
Well, as you're saying about thrill seeking, looking for the next thing instead of actually look at things that last. It seems like Amber's actually built a bit of an antidote to that, because from my understanding, Amber is the easiest way for me to set recurring purchases of Bitcoin and forget about it. And get back to that, almost that sugar chasing society.
Well, not even get back to the sugar chasing. I think it's like so the ethos for me. So like I'm really trying to emulate Bitcoin. So my idol in life, I'm just gonna say it now, is Bitcoin, right? That's my idol. I want to be like Bitcoin when I grow up. But When I grow up, I want to be a Bitcoin. Like I'm trying to emulate this idea of like this low time preference and just building quality, for myself. And I've learned the hard way trading markets and fucking around and doing all that sort of stuff for so many years. Like if I go back and think about all the time and effort I've wasted fucking with markets and trading and chart, all this noise, basically noise. Yeah, like there's a saying which is, and I think I said it earlier, which is nothing's wasted if you know how to use it. So now I'm using it by telling people don't fucking waste your time. And I'm using it as the driver for me to really embody in the product that I'm building the concept of a low time preference. So yes, Bitcoin offers, the most asymmetric opportunity, investment opportunity for the masses today. It is the one thing that offers like such an extraordinary degree of asymmetry because of the potential inversion, that can happen as a result of something like Bitcoin. There's going to be wild swing. There's going to be all of that sort of stuff. But, with a product like Amber, you can
skin in the game.
Yeah, you get some skin in the game, number one. And number two, it essentially it's optimized for you to lower your time preference and just spend time in the market instead of timing the market. There's no order books. There's no fancy shit like that where you can set limit orders and, try and trade your way through and look at charts and all that sort of shit. It's just about set an amount, set a frequency and start accumulating this thing.
Do you think that's detracted from, I hate to use the word adoption, but Bitcoin adoption for the last few years? Is that, because I remember getting, when I first got into Bitcoin, there was so much focus on price and market and trading, and you'd type in Bitcoin resources. Yes, you'd find Andreas, but you'd also find the 50
million traders
that all had their own podcasts and programs. There was just a real focus on making money, which isn't a bad thing, but almost to the extent that was the focus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because so again, it was just that they were just chasing the high, right? And it was just. So if we just sort of chunk up and sort of zoom out for a moment, like that was high time preference thinking again, because all they were worried about was the next buy signal, the next sell signal, the next pump, the next dump, and whatever. So it was literally this reactive, knee-jerk fucking sea of shit that basically formed around this thing that Bitcoin is, which is this low time preference, patience-oriented product or unit. And it's, I don't know, like sometimes I think about this and I'm like, maybe human beings will always just, coalesce, around something like this. So anyway, tying that back to Amber, like does it detract for us? Well, look, I hope more products are out there building high time preference shit.
Right, yeah.
So we can be the one product in the market or one of the few that really stand by the product, the methodology, and the underlying asset and money that we're trying to get people exposed to. And, hopefully we can, I'm going to chuck an Ayn Randism in here, but like hopefully we can John Galt a few people and, just get them to slowly opt out, because that's, realistically what this game is about, man.
Yeah, and I guess... So what does that look like then? Because at the moment, so the Amber app, even now, is entirely functional. You can jump on, create an account, and just literally set up a dollar cost average every week, every month, to the amount you want. It'll just sit there and purchase it for you every time, and you can withdraw it if you want.
Yep.
But I know you've got a roadmap, and I know that there's a lot planned down the future than just just the recurring investments. So what does that look in one year, and what does it look like in 2 years?
Well, the way I'll talk about it is I think what's most important is that there's a large capital base and a large holder base on Bitcoin more broadly. And I guess that's going to be measured through how much, total capital and total participants are in some way, shape or form holding Bitcoin. So that's sort of like that's like base camp for Bitcoin. And, so today the product is optimized for helping people just accumulate Bitcoin. Now in future, what I believe, and this is where Bitcoin being just this profoundly capitalist bloody beast is that there will be entrepreneurs, businesses, products and services built on and around Bitcoin that help leverage this asset for more utility and more use. So whether that's merchant services, whether that's lending and borrowing, whether that's payments, instant payments, time locked payments, there's all of this stuff that can come and shit that we just haven't imagined. Kind of Andreas talks about this quite a bit where he talks about skeuomorphic. Yeah. He talks about skeuomorphic designers. Today we can design and imagine things that are sort of within the paradigm that we understand today, but we can't really think and predict the shit that's going to come tomorrow.
Smartphones.
Yeah, exactly. Smartphones. The best one I use is the Instagrams and the Snapchats of the fucking. Not a chance in hell did we think of that, any of that shit. Or Uber. Fucking none of that stuff. Absolutely none of that stuff. The one thing we could think of was video conferencing, and we still can't get that shit right. We got everything else. What freeing money and making it information and making it owned by the participants will enable long term, I don't know. But for Amber, today, and for at least for the foreseeable future, I want to be the best place in the world for someone, or the easiest place in the world for somebody to acquire Bitcoin in a manner that I guess incentivizes low time preference. So it just lets you set, forget, and off you go. Then longer term is I want to enable users who have accumulated some Bitcoin to basically get all of the traditional banking and financial sort of services, but purely on Bitcoin without having to fundamentally be tied and restricted to a bank or to a fiat system. We may have to, have things restrictions and, whatever might come to sort of play as regulations sort of broaden around as Bitcoin becomes more financialized. But at least fundamentally we'll be giving those products and services atop a unit that is not inflating and losing purchasing power and all of that sort of stuff. I actually think that the future financial institutions are going to be built on Bitcoin, and that entire network is going to change. Now, when a large enough mass of those starts to operate, and there's an entire economic system, or a parallel system, that's sitting here whilst the Zuckbuck system and China's social credit score system sitting there, we'll be that opt-in system. Ideally we'll be able to unplug from the shit that, defines the existing system, but we're fundamentally one of those bridges. At the moment we need a connection point into both sides. And I'm hoping that whether this decade, next decade, sorry, not this decade, because that's going to end in a couple of months. Crazy, right? Over the coming decades, if I'm still at the helm of Amber, I'm hoping that we can set the dynamite on the other side of the bridge and just completely detach from that side of things. But that's a longer term vision, and how we get there is going to be really interesting. When I always use the analogy of Jeff Bezos came into the internet selling fucking books. And, he just had this profound insight into the internet is going to be so much bigger than what we can imagine today. Yeah. And that's basically what he set out to say. Is we're going to start with books, we'll sell some other shit later, and look at Amazon now. It's, the second, third biggest company in the world out of fucking nowhere. And today, we're a dollar cost averaging app. What that looks like tomorrow, I do not know. But really, really, really what juices me is just that journey more than anything. And it's fundamentally a really low time preference journey. I'm going to be doing this shit for the next decade or two.
That's so exciting. And you're so right when you mention, the things that we can't see, because you're mentioning time lock transactions. I heard that, that Internet of Money talk that Antonopoulos gave, and he suggested the idea that, of streaming money so you could get paid in real time by the millisecond. But you're right, we can't even see what the next sort of few things after that can be. It's so exciting.
Correct. That's about as far as we can imagine, right? What comes after streaming money? I don't know. Streaming time. I don't know. It just really, The 2020 decade is going to be incredible because we're literally seeing, like we sort of mentioned earlier, is this separation of money and state piece. I was on Stefan Livera's podcast the other week, and we sort of touched on the differences between Libra and Bitcoin, and and kind of like I would argue that Libra's red-pilled more people onto Bitcoin than anything else, than probably all the Bitcoiners together, because it's basically kind of cracked that that veneer for people and made them question them. Wait a minute, can money actually be issued by a non-government?
Because I was going to ask you that, because you mentioned Libra there earlier, and you talked about this emerging trend we're seeing where there has been a paradigm shift in people's mind, where they're starting to detach the concept of money from the central banking system, and you're seeing it both in the corporate sector and the ICOs and all that other stuff, all that other rubbish that went on as well, but governments are also starting to play in this space, and there's always this. The moment a government starts to play in your space, it legitimizes a lot of what you're doing in the eyes of a lot of people, and I think that's what's going on with even the government, even interacting with Libra in a lot of these countries. I mean, the Australian. One of the Australian departments put out an alert yesterday about Libra, basically mirroring what the US was saying, calling on them to clarify how they'll play in with the reserve banking system and how they'll protect data and consume it. But by even engaging with that, there is a degree of legitimization there. Yeah. But how do you see that playing out? How do you see that playing out in 5 years? What's your view on Libra?
Well, let's go back to the Cypherpunk manifesto, right? So the Cypherpunks came about, and they said, look, we're moving into a world, and I'm grossly paraphrasing here, but we're moving into a world which is becoming more digitized and more electronic. Privacy and privacy is a freedom, and the right to privacy, is a human right. It's a functional, critical component of liberty. And if communication starts to become electronic, and it's not private, we're trending towards a really fucking dangerous world. So first and foremost, we need to go and build open source software to enable private communications. And so that was like sort of the milestone number one, and milestone number two is we need to figure out if money is the means for it's the fabric of society, I like to call it. They were wise enough to see back then to say, look, not only do we need private communications, but we need a free form of money, which is censorship resistant, because if money does become electronic and it starts to center around, even if the group it centers around is initially well-meaning, prosperous, all of that, the fact that the risk exists for them to become authoritarian is enough for us to be fucking extraordinarily serious about having a version that is not that. Here's the thing: if you don't have a check and balance, you don't got nothing to check and balance. Like it's gonna go to the lowest common denominator. Like it's gonna the weakest link in the chain. So all of those sorts of analogies. So if we start with that sort of in mind, they've basically predicted where the world was trending, right? So technology and digitization is what's the word? Like it's become ubiquitous, in society now. That everything's ones and zeros and numbers and code effectively, and the governments are fighting to know everything about you, not only your communication but your the transactions that you make and your financial life and everything. Now the corporates want that as well, because power is fundamentally centralized around them. And as you would, like if you're a consortium that is the LIbra consortium, you're about as powerful as the central bank cartel effectively. So why wouldn't you want a piece of that? And realistically, the only thing, like the last bastion of freedom in this world that exists at this point in time that I can see, is we either go back to fucking trading shiny yellow stones in small communities that are detached from everything else, or we have a digital gold. When people sit there and say, oh, well, Bitcoin only it's just money, like who cares? I'm like, wow, like, you know, like it's the most profound, important piece. And like without that, all of your stupid fucking apps and all of the rubbish and garbage that you're fucking talking about is meaningless, absolutely meaningless in a world that is fundamentally non-free or closed authoritarian. Like it's a fucking scary time, man. And like, you know, those of us who are woke enough, like, you know, we're going to be part of this, you know, ecosystem where we can collaborate freely and be rewarded for productivity and for intelligence, whereas the rest of these idiots are going to converge on a system that
it's a technocracy.
Yeah, exactly. It's and it's fucking scary shit. Like they're not going to be the best at who they are. They're going to be living in fear. They're going and like I feel like I'm sounding like freaking Alex Jones here, and I'm not trying to, because it's like very easy to start going off the deep end there. But like realistically, like you could accidentally like the wrong thing on Facebook, and you know, let's say in that kind of a future, you lose some points on your score, and now all of a sudden you're not allowed to spend more than $100, and you get frustrated, and you know you fucking say the wrong thing, and now you know you're not allowed to spend more than $20 a day, and you know all of a sudden you end up getting disconnected from society. Like there's no other money. No one's going to accept your fucking paper because paper doesn't exist. What are you going to do? Like literally, you can get turned off, and that like you know
that's already happening in China. Like they're trialing that social. I mean, we covered it a few months ago. There's people over there who they can't buy a car, they can't get on public transport.
Yeah, they can't get it. Yeah,
you know, just completely shut out.
Yeah,
exactly, for making a comment on social media about the government. Yeah, in a negative light.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah,
and the algorithm just
correct. And who decides what's negative or not? Right, it's whoever the fuck woke up today.
Well, yeah, I mean, now you're getting into like, because that's the big issue, isn't it? Like it's who holds the reins.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. Yeah.
And you know, are our lawmakers making laws that are just in the way of natural law and first principles, like you're talking about, or are they making laws which suit a ruling class and can change on a whim?
Yeah, correct. Or even in their incompetence to try and make laws to make it better for everyone, they inherently make it more complex. And more fucked up, such that you can't make a move without making a wrong move.
Yeah.
In which case, everything you do is fucking illegal, and you know.
Yeah, and that's foreseeable. That's completely foreseeable.
So to answer your question, you know, I'm sounding like, you know, Mark Faber, gloom, boom, and doom, or whatever the fuck his stupid thing was called back in the day. Like it's a scary world. So in the next 5 years, like I actually think we're probably going to see like. I don't know. Some days I think we're not going to see Libra take off. Some days I think we are. I don't know, but
there's definitely a network effect there.
There's definitely a network effect there. There's you know, I mean, it depends on how many of these jurisdictions or countries decide to like basically agree to a Faustian bargain. And to let, you know, that in their doors, because it's all over for them. Like I wrote an article about it a couple of weeks ago, which was, I already don't agree with like the fiat system, you know, and this probably has more utility, but like, is this jumping from the fry pan into the fire? Like, and I don't know how to answer that. Like, you know, my intuition is that it probably is jumping into the fire for a lot of people. And I mean, it just reinforces. Like I spoke to this reporter who was asking me like when the whole Libra thing came out, they're like, oh yeah, so what does this do to Bitcoin? I was like, man, this not only validates Bitcoin because now it like sort of validates the notion of a non-state money, but it also validates Bitcoin's choice to optimize for security, censorship resistance, self-sovereignty, you know, uninflatability, etc. For those things that every moron who was trying to build an altcoin thought was fucking boring.
Yeah.
And in one fell swoop, it makes every single altcoin, every single blockchain, all of that other shit completely obsolete.
What was interesting watching the reactions from the Bitcoin Cash communities and the SV communities and all those different communities around Libra, very, very, I wouldn't say scared. No, look, I would probably say scared for a lot of them. And they felt like it was a real encroachment on their territory in a lot of ways. but there wasn't that reaction from the Bitcoin community.
Yeah, the Bitcoin community was cheering. We were all like, fucking yes.
Another blue pill.
Yeah.
Red pill.
Yeah. Yeah, it's saying that to that reporter, I was basically saying what we're saying now, which is Libra is just such a like it juxtaposes Bitcoin. It validates it in more than one way and just reinforces the importance of having an opt-out. Now, one could argue and say, look, you know, the Libra system will be fair, and like, you know, Zuck's not going to, you know, fucking watch you while you're taking a shit. Like, you know, all of these things, you know, people are going to say, and that may well be true. And, you know, we may not go down a technocratic dystopia. You know, maybe the world will be okay. But if anything, Bitcoin is going to act as this check and balance. It's just going to hang around here and be like, hey, motherfucker, like if you do go down that path, I'm here. And anyone who wants to jump ship, come across.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you for who you are, what you are. It's opt in. You can come across anytime. You don't like it, you can go back there. Like, it's such a powerful, peaceful protest. Like, it's fuck, man.
And it's almost going to be like that symbol, like gold and silver, when you're seeing gold prices. And in some ways, you can almost see it joining that sort of idea when you're saying it's still going to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but exactly. But it'll transcend those things to
absolutely.
to such a degree. Like, you know, whilst I think gold and silver is there, I think gold and silver have been because they're physical objects. They trend to concentration, and as a result, they've just been basically cheapened to these financial products, basically that you know really just form part of a financial ecosystem.
Just adding the practicality layer to a lot of that. Yeah.
What Bitcoin is?
Yeah,
correct, exactly. So Bitcoin not only represents, so a lot of people, you know, when they talk about the digital gold narrative, you know, again, there's probably like two narratives there. People, when they talk about the digital gold narrative, they're talking about the investment thesis, but there's a more profound digital gold narrative, which is an opt-out economic system that sits parallel to the other systems that are growing. And that are taking hold, because I mean the world may well become, you know, in 20 years' time, 4 states: US, China, Libra, Bitcoin, and the US, China, and Libra, you know, may have guns pointed outwards and inwards. And the Bitcoin state has a bunch of guns pointed outwards, and because all the smart people are there, we just got better guns. So there's probably going to be less of us, and we'll just. Correct, and you know we just, you know, the cool kids, and so like Naval Ravikant, he's like a kind of like startup guru or whatever, like, you know.
Oh yeah, he was on the Rogan thing.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so he that was a brilliant podcast. So he had an interesting tweet. He goes like the world is the future of the world is small self-sovereign states surrounded by large homogenous states. Where the small ones are protected through like networks of drones and guns, so they're impenetrable. And I was like, fuck yeah. They're the Bitcoin citadels. Literally. Yes. Because they're going to need an economic system, man. You can't have a society and, you know, humans cooperating without one. So like, yeah, man, it's interesting couple decades ahead.
What are some of the lessons that you've learned over this journey? I guess sort of like from a bit of a business perspective, but also from like a financial perspective, and almost like, what do you?
Let's try sum it up in the spirit of the show. Good things take time. Low time preference. So if I've learned anything in business, is that you know, whilst the hustle has to be there, the grind has to be there. Like the idea that nothing comes without a struggle is critically important, and nothing comes without really putting effort, time, and, you know, sacrifice and patience into it. Like, you know, if you think you're going to get fucking rich quick, you're going to lose the shit quick. I've had a number of friends who've, you know, fundamentally gotten lucky. Like, although they have worked hard, you know, they've gotten a big windfall and, you know, they've given all of it back. Like me in the younger years, I was a perfect example of that. Made money quick, lost money quick. When I started that solar company, despite trying to, you know, optimize for quality, I still made a shitload of money really quickly when those rebates came out, and then I lost the fucking shit really quickly. So, you know, if I've learned anything, being contrarian is incredibly important. And having that, quality sort of low time preference outlook on doing things matters, because you're not only going to build something good that people want, but you're going to do it in a way that you actually give a shit about, what you're doing. So I think that should probably be like the sum up lesson.
Yeah. Of Aleks Svetski's life.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically. The guy who moves at 100 million miles an hour, telling everybody to take it slow.
I know it's already.
The fucking irony. Holy shit.
You read a lot. Yeah. And it sounds like, you've obviously learned a lot of lessons through life, but I get the impression that you also learn a lot through what you read. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what you've learned is mirrored through what you read in a lot of ways, kind of reinforcing some of the lessons you've learned. Yeah. So if I'm a 20-year entrepreneur where you were 10, 12 years ago, whatever, and I want to skip all the mucking around and a lot of the mistakes, obviously you can't put an old head on young shoulders, but what would you recommend I read? What are some books you could send me to?
If it's business, the first and only book you need to read is Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
Okay.
Hands down, it's the most important book for anybody in business to read. Like he doesn't talk about the niceties and, management theories by fucking people who've, worked at somebody else's company and come out and, come up with some bullshit theory, whilst the company was in peacetime. Like he talks about the struggle and the fucking trauma he went through of building a company through the .com fucking boom and bust and all the shit that came with that. It's a traumatizing book. I've read the fucking book 11 times now.
Wow.
And I learn something new every single time.
That's written by Ben Horowitz, isn't it?
Ben Horowitz.
That's of Andreessen Horowitz. But so there's so many different lessons in there. And I guess what are some of the bits that stand out to you from that book?
I'll bring up the struggle again. Like he talks about the struggle in there, as this thing that, is, the entrepreneur's journey is about the struggle. And that's, the thing that you should come to expect. And, one of the things I got out of that book was just this, this inherent persistence and perseverance, like at so many points in time, like that kind of stuff. And I've found that in my life. Like there's been points in time where I've just thought, fuck, there is no chance we're going to make this shit. And I've just, I don't know, some part of me is like, fucking just one more last minute push. And then, you kind of find your way through and something happens and it lines up and, you're through. So for me, that was really the big takeaway. I think that's more important in being an entrepreneur. And that really also ties into like low time preference as well, because like I wrote an article a little while ago for some publication where they were asking, what's the secret to being an entrepreneur? I said, well, look, it's persistence, which is made up of being patient and lucky. And continually, moving forward. And I think a lot of people discount that because randomness or luck has an outsized impact on our lives. And most people discount it, So most people who get lucky think they're not lucky. And most people who are unlucky think they're unlucky when in fact, just randomness has worked in a slightly different way for them. If you're around long enough and if you've got the grit and the persistence to be around long enough, at some point in time, randomness will line up for you. And if you're consistently producing, adding value, growing and doing, what drives you and what the greatest impact or input you can have, you start to get this effect where randomness or luck aligns with the input that you're putting in.
Your position.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the game right there.
Put yourself in a place to get lucky.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the game of life.
Yep.
Right there. Game, set, match is do some fucking good shit that you care about and continue doing it irrespective of how hard it gets. Maybe not to the point of blind stubbornness where you're just doing shit because you are, like, be open enough to, like, adapt, as things come. But I think that's literally, the core lesson for, that I got out of that book, in a really roundabout way. What
about money? Because money that's business, but you've done a whole bunch of reading on money. Is there a book you'd send people to for money to learn about it?
either Sapiens
Yep.
or Safe It Needs book.
Okay.
Bitcoin Standard, one
Yep.
of those two. Like
Yep.
I think those are
Yep.
really like.
Yeah, or don't get the audio book on the Bitcoin Standard because the narrator's not very good. But
I thought it was okay, but
did you?
Yeah, I didn't
Unless we
mind
got a
him.
different narrator.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
I didn't mind him too much, but
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Bitcoin Standard or Sapiens, I think are really good. One is more of an anthropological sort of story, and the other one's more a story of money as an emergent good. I think both of them together. There's actually another one which I think is useful too. Is Debt the First 5,000 Years by I think it's David Graeber, isn't it? Have you read that one?
No, I haven't read that one.
Yeah, that one's a really interesting one. It sort of talks about how money evolved initially as promises, effectively. And then there's one that I read a little while ago. I'm going to look for it on my Audible quickly. Knowing me, it's probably called Money. The History of Money, of course. Jack Weatherford. Now that was pretty good. I don't think that the author really understood money very deeply, but it was sort of more the history of money. So you can sort of you get the sense of how money was different things along the way, and you start to realize that it wasn't always just some paper issued by a government, and it really sort of allows people to think broader. But if you had to pick one or two, like Sapiens and Bitcoin Standard by far.
Well, I know for a fact after this conversation, I'm absolutely doubling the amount that I'm just going to dollar cost average in, just because maybe I'm just getting a bit excited with it. But no, 100%. Like you explained very eloquently a number of the points on it, and I think it just to a lot of people who are listening who already love Bitcoin, it just absolutely reinforces a lot of that point and drove it home for me. So I mean, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Like every time I fucking jump on one of these, like I get off and I buy some more Bitcoin. I'm like, I'm telling everybody else, fuck, they're going to buy some of it. I want it before they do because I'm selfish.
It's always hard, isn't it? There's always a little nagging doubt in your head when you go to buy, isn't it? You think, oh yeah, but I know the current monetary system. But you're completely right, and mate, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know we've been meaning to do this for a long time. So for people that want to, because you're prolific online, like you write, you tweet, your tweets are hilarious, by the way. Your LinkedIn posts are actually hilarious. I've never seen anyone post on LinkedIn like you post on LinkedIn, which is just so funny. But if people do want to find you online, where do they go?
So my name's spelled a bit funny, so Aleks Svetski, Svetski. So, I mean, if you Google that, generally my Twitter and all that sort of stuff comes up. I've tried to be relatively consistent, so I'm pretty sure most of my tags are Aleks Svetski, so you'll need to put both S's in there. I think some of them might be my full name, Alexander Svetski, but I mean, better to just search that and you'll find it. Hackanoon, Medium, Twitter, LinkedIn, always spamming. Oh, and Amber, so to look up Amber, if you're in Australia, we can definitely service you now. I'm hoping to be in Europe and UK later this year, so then we'll be able to help people out that side. Amber.app, that's it. So it's nice and easy. You can
find it on the Play Store and the iTunes Store.
Yep, just literally. Yep. So we're right up the top now. So you type in Amber, you'll find it. So download it. It's really simple. You just put in your BSB and account number and set a time. So set an amount, a frequency, and when you want it to start, and literally just. Like, I think there's that saying, it's like, the best time to buy Bitcoin was like, whatever that dip was, right?
Yeah.
And the next best time to buy it is fucking now. So like, just get in there, man. Like even me, I'm Mr., Bitcoin fucking aficionado, and I've got like all of these unfilled limit orders on my exchange accounts because I was trying to be smart and buy the dips that never came. And I missed out on all of this Bitcoin whilst my freaking Amber app was just buying the whole time.
Yep.
So, on my exchange accounts, I'm up a little bit. On my Amber app, I'm up like hundreds of %. So it's just, you just can't beat DCA.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And we'll whack the link in the show notes too for that. And yeah, I guess the only other thing to say is thank you so much, Aleks. It's been an amazing interview. It's been awesome fun. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing where Amber goes.
Absolute pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on. This has been a long time coming, and please do not delete the file because I don't have another 2 hours in me.
And with that, we're going to save the file.
See you guys. Thank you.
Bye, Bitcoin.